Oh, well, you should have been halfway through.
I know. Then I'd have to do seventh period. Okay, so we said 5 can go into 15 3 times, and then 5 goes into 24 times. Okay, what about the number 26 and 39? Yeah, 3 goes into 39, but not 26. 13. Okay, so 13 can go in here twice, and then 13 goes in here 3 times. Okay, so now what we're looking at is sometimes we don't pick the biggest number, and we can still go further. So we just double check, even though we've already changed all the numbers once. Sometimes you can change it more than once because you didn't pick the biggest number. But in our case, we did. Okay, because 2 would be our common factor on the bottom, if the 2 can't go in 3 on top. Okay, so now we just multiply straight across. So numerator is going to be 9 over 8, and then we would say 1 and 1. Okay, we won't be simplifying because we're going to have variables in it, but we just know that we go straight across, top to top, bottom to bottom. Okay, so do it again, but now we have variables. Okay, 6 and 10. What can go into those? 2. Okay, so that would make this 3, make this 5. Okay, the 7 and the 14, 7. Okay, so this goes to 1 and this goes to 2. Okay, now we have variables left. What do we do with variables when we have like term with a top and a bottom? We subtract the exponents. Okay, so we always say that we move the smaller one to the larger one because we don't want to have negative exponents. Okay, so if you wind up with a negative exponent in your answer, how can we make it a positive? So say I have this. How do I make that? You just flip it. Okay, so if you wind up with that because you just moved one randomly to the other one, subtracted it, didn't pay attention, you can always just flip it back up to the top, which would make it next to the second top. Okay, so we're looking at y's. So I'm going to move the bottom one to the top one. This one has a 1 as an exponent, even though we don't write it there. And I'm going to subtract it. So that means my answer went to the top. Okay, so when I go to write my answer, I want it at the top. Okay, because I moved it up there. Okay, what about the x's? Just an x, right? And it's going to stay where it's at because there wasn't another one to combine with. Okay, now I'm looking at my numbers. So I'm going straight across. So 3 times 2 would make it 6. And then on the bottom, I'm going to have 5. Okay, so we're not going to change this to a mixed number because we've got the variables involved. We just leave it like that. Okay? You good? Okay, so this is multiplication. Multiplication means the number and the variables have to be next to each other in order for you to simplify. Okay, so remember that when we get to our next one because I'm going to show you what the common mistake is. Okay, so these are actually the problems we're going to be doing. So number 1. So you're going to write x to the second minus 4 over x to the second minus x minus 2. Taking us back to factoring and remembering how to factor. Okay, so the top number is a perfect square binomial. Okay, it has to be a perfect square, and the sign in the middle has to be a negative. Okay, and if that's true, then you can split it up into the 2 parentheses. What are my signs going to be? Positive and a negative. Okay, I split up my x's, and then the square root of 4 is going to be 2. Okay, so we've got our version. Okay, now the bottom one, we've got 2 parentheses. Remember, when it ends in a negative, it means the signs are going to be different. So one's going to be a plus, one's going to be a minus. I split up my x's, and then because there's no number in the front, I can do the read backwards thing. So what are my factors of 2 that's subtracting then 1? Well, the only factors of 2 are 1 and 2. Okay, so we always pick the larger number, and we put it behind the sign of your second term. So that means the 2 has to go here, and the 1 has to go there. Okay, if you forgot factoring, like what goes where, remember you can always check it. If I distributed that to that would give me a negative 2x, and then that would give me 1x, which gives me a negative. Okay, otherwise if it was flipped, then you flip your signs. Okay, we're good to there. Okay, now we have it as a multiplication now. So this is being multiplied times this. This is being multiplied times this. You can only cross cancel what's in the parentheses with another thing that's in the parentheses. Okay, so an x plus 2, I don't have another x plus 2. An x minus 2, I have an x minus 2. So this right here is what is left that cannot be simplified. Okay, now if you were listening in the last one, the common mistake is people want to say, oh, x over x, I'm going to get rid of it. Now it's 2 over 1, which is just 2. Okay? That would be this. Then yes, you could do that because it's a multiplication problem. Okay? So you can get this, rid of that, and then simplify your whole numbers. This is not that. Okay? So don't start crossing out x's randomly. It's an addition problem. Okay? You can't do that. Okay. Moving on. Trying it again. Number 2. So x to the second over x minus 5 times x to the second minus 3x minus 10 over x to the second plus 2x. Okay, so the top one, you could technically leave this, and I'll talk about it when we get done. I think it's easier if you can break it down, other than if it was a really big number, I wouldn't do that. I would write out 20 x's, okay? This one's already simplified. Okay, but now I've got to simplify that one. What are my signs going to be? Positive and a negative. Okay, split up my x's. And because there's no number in the front, I can read backwards. What are my factors of 10 that subtract to give me 3? 5 and 2. Where am I putting the 5? Behind the negative. Okay, this next one is a binomial, but it's not a perfect square binomial. So that means you can't do the 2 parentheses. But what we can do is still factor something out. An x. Okay, so now we write this one. Okay, now we have everything broken down and everything is written as multiplication. So we're doing the same thing we did on the last one. We're looking for something in the parentheses on top. It looks like something on the bottom to cross off. Okay, so I have an x minus 5 and an x minus 5. And then I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2. What else can I do? X's, right? So this one and this one can cancel itself out. So all that's left is x. Okay, so if we didn't do that to that, and you got down to this because we left that, and then have that one there, then you would do the same thing we talked about at the beginning. Move the smaller to larger, subtract it. You would still get the same thing.
Wait a minute.
Yes. Question.
How'd you get x squared?
The original had x squared, and we broke it down into x and x. I said if you didn't do that in the beginning, you would have still had x squared right here. Then you would have this one and this one still left. So if you didn't break it apart, you would still get to x squared over x, which we can reduce that by subtracting, which is like the very
But
beginning.
everything crossed out except for the one x, right? At the top.
This, the x plus 2 crossed off of this one. The x minus 5 crossed off of this one, and we were left with this and this.
Oh, you can't take one of the, you can't cross out one of the x's with that x?
We did do that.
Wait, then if we did that, then we would do one x.
It's just x.
Oh, so it is just x.
Yeah. But I'm saying
Oh,
if
so
you,
you're like writing it out by putting x squared over it.
right, because I said if you didn't
Oh.
split this up, you would have x squared over x, that you would still get to the same answer, which is,
Oh.
okay. Gotta have a walker in every class, right? Okay, number 3. Okay, so now we have division, so we're going to keep dot and then flip. So we're still doing the same thing, we're just going to have to rewrite it when we see the division ones. So you have 5d to the 5th over 6f divided by 35d to the 2nd e to the 5th. Okay, so we keep our first one. change that, right? Dot multiplication, but this now we flip. So this is this, when it's written on the whole number, so now we flip it. This is just like what we did on that very first page, other than we didn't have as many variables. Oh, we had X and Y, but this has an F. Okay, so what's the only number that I can simplify? 75, right? Or 75, 35. So 5 goes into there once, goes into there 7 times. Okay, so we're done with our, because all we have left at the top is 1, so we know we can't go any further. So now we start looking at our variables. Okay, so I'm looking at D first. So it's the smaller one, so it means I move it down to the bottom and subtract. So 1 from 2 is just going to leave 1. You can put a 1 there if you want to. You don't have to. Okay, so we're done with the D's. So I'm going to cross it out so I can keep track. Okay, what happens to the E's? It cancels out because we e to the 0, right? Which means there isn't 1. Okay, what's left? The F, and there isn't another F, right? So it's going to stay down at the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to put our numbers in. So 1 times 1 is 1, and then 6 times 7 would be 42. I think the common mistake is people not noticing their numbers, and they wrote just like 6DF, or they don't write a 1 over this, they just write it as 42DF. Okay, so just slow down and pay attention. The ones, the numerator was still there. Yes?
So now you said like if one of the variables is a negative,
Uh-huh.
so you have to put it up top, right?
Right. So say you took everything up to the top, because that's, I know there's some teachers that teach that. They take everything up to the top. That would change that F to a -1. That would change this D to a -2, right? So you'd have 1 and a -2, which would make it a -1. And I can't have a negative as an exponent, so I would bring it back down to the bottom. Okay, same thing with the F. If I moved it up, it would change it to a -1. You can't have negatives, so you have to bring it back down to the bottom. This one, it didn't matter which one we moved, right? Because if I move that one down, it's a -5. If I move that one up, it's a -5, it's still going to be 0. Does that mean there's no E?
So like, say you have like D negative.
That would be wrong. Right. So to make that positive, you would have to bring it down to the bottom.
So
And then you'd have a 1 up there.
say if that was at the bottom and the F is next to the F, it's positive.
Just the D. This one that has a negative exponent. Those are the
What if you had a negative on top, but a positive exponent on the bottom? Or a negative exponent on top and a positive on the bottom, and you flip them, would it switch the positive one to the negative one?
No, just the one that you're moving. So when you move this one down, it's going to change the Z to a positive, just the exponent. Everything else stays there. Unless you moved it to the top, then it's going to switch it to a negative, and you don't want that, because that's what you're trying to avoid. Good? Okay. So I think this last one, we have so much to try. Yeah. So 5x to the second plus 23x minus 10 over 5x to the second plus 17x plus 6 divided by 25 minus x squared over 10x squared plus 4x. Okay, this one's a little bit different just because we have a coefficient before the x's, so we have to factor that in when we break up our parentheses. We cannot do the read backwards thing because of the 5 that's in front. And then also, if you look at the numerator of your second fraction, it's flipped. Like the x's should be first in order for us to factor, so we're going to have to rewrite that one. Okay, so let's start with the first one. So the first one, I'm looking at this one right there. Okay, I'm going to do my 2 parentheses. Signs are going to be different. Okay, but the only way we can do this one now is, some of you I know you can do this in your head, but is trial and error. Okay, so our first number, we're putting in the first position the factors of it. Well, the only factors of 5 are 1 and 5. I know I always put 1 and 5 just because that's the way I count. okay? It doesn't mean that that's gonna be the right order. Sometimes we're gonna have to move things around, okay? So I'm gonna go write it, let me finish writing it out, and then if it's right, then you can write it in, okay? Okay, so I have put my x's there. Okay, my factors of 10 are 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. So if you remember last year, I said don't ever start with the 1 and something, because usually it's too far away and it's gonna make too big of a number. Okay, pick the numbers that are closer to each other. Now if it's 1 and 4, that's close. I would maybe start with the 1 and 4. Okay, I'm gonna do 2 and 5. So again, I always just write my numbers in order. It doesn't mean that that's gonna be what works. Okay, so if I were to check that, that would give me a negative 5x, and that would give me a positive 10x, which is not what's in the middle. Okay, so if that happens, then just switch the last two that you put in there. Okay, so I just put it on the eraser. I'm going to put the 5 here and the 2 here. Okay, so when I check that, that gives me a negative 2x. That gives me a positive 25x, which gives me a positive 23x, and that's what I needed. So sometimes you have to rearrange, flip the numbers. Okay, so this should be 1x plus 5, and then 5x minus 2. Okay, I'm going to erase what's below it. So okay, so now we're doing the bottom. Okay, so we're doing it again. This one's going to be easier just because the signs are going to be the same, so I don't have to worry about it being in the wrong position. So a plus and a plus. Okay, I'm going to go 1x and 5x again. We have 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So I would pick the 2 and 3, and I'm trying to get 17. Okay, so if I put the 2 here and the 3 here, right, that would give me 3x, that would give me 10x. That does not give me 17. So I'm going to flip my 3 and 2. I'm going to put the 3 here and the 2 here. That gives me 2x, that gives me 15x, and 2x and 15x gives me 17x. So you should have 1x plus 3, and then 5x plus 2. Good? Okay, so keep, dot, and now we're flipping it. So I'm going to do this one. Whoop, I'm going to do that one first. Okay, this is at the top. Okay, it's a binomial, but it's not a perfect square binomial. What's the greatest factor that can come out of there? 2 and an x. Okay, right, what's left, which will be 5x plus 2. Okay, now the other one comes down to the bottom, but I need the x's to be first because all the other things I'm trying to cross cancel with have x's first, right? So we need to rewrite it to see if it cancels with something. So to do that, we write it like this. So we have x squared, because if I distributed that, right, it gives me negative x. What's that 25 would be? Negative. Right, so if I distribute that, that gets me back to the original system flip. Okay, now we have a perfect square binomial. Okay, the -1 is still there. Okay, but now I can go x plus what? And x minus. So all that did is just flip it so that we can have the x's first. Okay, now we're looking for exact same thing on top as what's on the bottom to start getting rid of things. So I have an x plus 5 and an x plus 5. I have a 5x minus 2, but I don't have another 5x minus 2. Okay, a 5x plus 2 and a 5x plus 2. And then we're done. Because the 2x would be with something that's down here and there's not anything. Okay, so 2x is still there. At the top, we still have 5x minus 2. And then on the bottom, you have an x plus 3 and the -1 and an x minus 5. Okay, now something I just want to point out, that's right, okay? Sometimes on the exercise, sometimes, they will distribute it back and write a simplified numerator and then distribute it back, write the simplified denominator, sometimes. Okay, so just so you recognize that if you distributed the 2x with 5x, you'd have 10x squared minus 4x, okay? So just don't panic when you do these on the multiple choice. You're like, oh, my answer's not there. Okay. and then that would just distribute and switch all the signs. Okay, that's as hard as it gets. Okay, try it. Any questions on that first one? Because that's generally the harder one.
To be times 5.
It is 5 feet. My thing is.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought that was 6.
No, it's a 5. 2b times 5b plus 1.
That's what I got because I got stuck trying to factor.
Okay, on the answer key, I'm just pointing this out. This is what I'm talking about when you get to the multiple choice. On 89, they flipped one of those parentheses on the bottom. So they had, on the bottom, they had 4 minus 3b, which is just distributing that negative just to that one. Because this one and this one went away, and then this one and this one went away. So they just distributed that negative back in there, and then flipped it around to write it as one of the answers. But that's.
Wait, is the red what it's supposed to be?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying though, and some of the multiple choice, they'll write something a little bit different, so you just have to recognize, oh, they flipped it because normally the V's or the variables are first. And they distributed that back into there and flipped it around and made it a positive 4 and a negative 3. Which is still the same.
6 feet or
5 feet. It's what's left right here. 5 feet. And mark the root. And then 94, you should have got just 28 EG, no fraction, unless you put it over 1, which is fine. And then 97, everything crosses off except for the T minus 1 on top and the T minus 6 on the bottom. Yeah. That's true. Did I? Oh, it is. Thank you. It is.
Can you erase the ones over 94?
94.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's-
Okay, just working on the try it. We'll grade it tomorrow at the beginning.